Welcome to the Invite Health podcast, where our degreed healthcare professionals are excited to offer you the most important health and wellness information you need to make informed choices about your health. You can learn more about the products discussed in each of these episodes and all that Invite Health has to offer at www.invitehealth.com/podcast. First-time customers can use promo code podcast at checkout for an additional 15% off your first purchase. Let's get started.
Restless leg syndrome is described as this vague set of symptoms that are even hard to define by people. But they get this uncontrollable need to move their legs at night to get rid of these vague, unpleasant sensations. So, it affects their night's sleep. It really is a problem because the next day they're less productive at work. It affects them socially. They don't have the energy to go out. And it affects them health-wise because they don't have the energy to exercise and stay healthy. Beyond that, sometimes in the morning they get this little period where the symptoms decline and they could get a little sleep in the morning. So restless leg syndrome affects tens of millions of Americans. Generally, it gets worse with age. It generally affects more women than men. It's usually in the legs. Rarely it can affect the arms. So what do you do? How to improve and how to help restless leg syndrome is what we're going to talk about on this program. And we're going to focus on the natural alternatives you have and lifestyle changes for improving it. Because some of the drugs they use for restless leg syndrome, you really shouldn't be taking. So welcome to my program. My name is Jerry Hickey. I'm a nutritional pharmacist. I'm also the senior scientific officer over here at Invite Health. I want to thank you for tuning in today. You'll find all of our episodes for our podcast for free wherever you listen to podcasts, or just visit invitehealth.com/podcast. Please subscribe and leave us a review. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Invite Health. The information on this episode is linked at the episode description. So let's get going. Here's the best I could do with describing the symptoms of restless leg syndrome. The chief symptom is you need to move your legs. So the weird sensations, the vague sensations, typically begin after you've been lying down for an extended period of time, or like sitting in a car or sitting in a chair for an extended period of time. And you get rid of the sensations by moving your legs. Stretching, jiggling your legs, getting up and walking. The symptoms generally occur at night. They mainly occur at night. So you get this irresistible urge to move your legs, and it's accompanied by difficult to define symptoms, like aching sometimes, itching, sometimes electric shocks. People describe it like that, like pins and needles. We call that paresthesias technically. This crawling or creeping sensation, a pulling or throbbing sensation. Now, it's estimated that up to 7 to 10% of the U.S. population has restless leg syndrome. That's a big number. We're talking like 23, 33 million people. Like I said, women frequently have it more often than men. It can begin at any age, but the symptoms typically become more common, more frequent as you grow older, and they tend to last longer at night. More than 80% of the people with restless leg syndrome have a second condition called periodic limb movement of sleep, PLMS. So that's like twitching or jerking movements of your arms and legs at night where you're sleeping. It can happen like every 40 seconds, and sometimes it can last all night. Now, there are different causes and risk factors for restless leg syndrome. Like, for instance, there's a genetic component. You inherit it from your parents, especially if it starts at a younger age, like before the age of 40. Sometimes it's related to drinking alcohol, smoking cigarettes, consuming too much caffeine. We'll get into all this because we'll get into treatments and lifestyle changes. So some of the other risk factors are, it could be related to diabetes, because diabetes inflames you. Diabetes is a disease of metabolism, not just blood sugar. Diabetes affects inflammation. It affects energy production. It affects your triglycerides, a kind of greasy blood fat. It affects your cholesterol levels. So diabetes is a disease of metabolism, not just sugar, but sugar, of course, is the major component. And in diabetes, besides causing inflammation and reducing your ability to create energy, it affects your circulation, it affects your nerve health. It could be related to kidney failure. The kidneys release a hormone called erythropoietin, that has to do with creating red blood cells, and also the kidneys are involved with iron metabolism, so you can have an iron deficiency, often with anemia. Spinal cord conditions, like if you have a lesion on your spinal cord as a result of an injury, like an accident. It could be related to circulatory problems. It could be related to problems with iron. It could be related to lacking certain nutrients. So we'll go into all this. So let's go into the drug treatments first. Some of the drugs are rather nasty. Now, they do use the drugs that are used for Parkinson's disease, like Requip or Nupro or Mirapex. These drugs affect the chemical messenger in the back of the brain called dopamine. So dopamine works throughout the body, but in the back of the brain, dopamine is involved with your balance, your gait, like how you walk, your muscle function. It opposes acetylcholine. So for instance, in people with Parkinson's disease, there's a big lack of dopamine, and acetylcholine takes over, and it's activating their muscles, which is called muscle innervation, and the muscles stiffen. So the person stiffens, it's hard for them to walk, they start to develop tremors. So they give them drugs that increase dopamine. The problem with the drugs that increase dopamine in restless leg syndrome is quite often they can make the symptoms even worse. But also, they cause problems with your impulse control. Like, you could become a gambler. If you use dopamine-increasing drugs, they're so powerful, you could become a compulsive gambler. You're going to gamble away your kid's college fund, or your car, or your watch, or your house. But also, they make you sleepy in the daytime. Then there's opioids. Don't go on those. They're addictive. They can interfere with your breathing, especially if you have alcohol. And don't forget, alcohol is found in cough and cold drugs. They use muscle relaxants. Can have problems. They cause daytime sleepiness. Sleep medications, don't do it. Sleep medications are almost as dangerous as opioids. Opioids reduce pain. They're related to heroin. But sleep medications are right behind opioids for causing people to overdose and even die because it affects your ability to breathe. So a lot of these drugs. Now, one thing you could do if you have restless leg syndrome, have them do an iron profile. They could check your ferritin. They could check your iron binding capacity, how many receptor sites you have in your intestines to load iron, and how saturated it is. They can look at these things. They can look at your MCHC, which is your average hemoglobin, and your red blood cells. That tells you how much, generally gives you an idea if you have enough iron. You can look at the palms of your hand. They should be reddish. You can look at your lips. They shouldn't be pale. Another indication that you lack iron is you get every cold that comes by you. Your immune system isn't working. Iron is very important for the immune system. So iron is involved with dopamine. In the back of the brain, you have basal ganglia. And inside the basal ganglia, you have the substantia nigra pars compacta, which is very dark. That's the iron component in there. That's where the dopamine and the acetylcholine works. If you have a problem with iron, like genetically have a problem using it, sometimes people with ADHD have trouble using iron in the brain, or if you're low in iron, and you don't have to be anemic, you could just be a little low in iron, it can affect dopamine in the back of the brain and in the substantia nigra pars compacta, part of the brain, and this can affect your muscles, and this can lead to problems with restless leg syndrome. So iron supplements can help. They really can. They help a lot of people with restless leg syndrome. Here's the issue. The typical irons, they're absorbed well, but they have a lot of side effects. Like a typical iron would be ferrous sulfate, Fiasol. And the problem with that ferrous sulfate, it's really well absorbed, but it's very constipating. It irritates the intestines and stomach, and it could cause nausea and vomiting. So people wind up not using it. Use a gentler iron, like iron bisglycinate. It's very well absorbed. It doesn't cause nausea. It doesn't make you vomit or anything. It doesn't cause constipation. It's a much better source of iron for the general public. So I would go with that. Another group of drugs they use are drugs that were originally developed for seizures, and then they found out they help with nerve pain, like gabapentin, which is Neurontin, or pregabalin, which is Lyrica. The problem with those drugs, some of them don't work quite well. I think Lyrica works better. But also, they make you like a zombie in the daytime. They make you so sleepy. I would prefer using Alcar with ALA instead of using gabapentin or pregabalin. Alcar with ALA are two natural substances that are found in the brain and in your muscles and in your heart, and they really help with nerve pain. So if a nerve problem is part of the issue leading to restless leg syndrome, try the alcohol with ALA. The best way to take alcohol with ALA is away from food because it gets into your nerves and your brain easier if you take it away from food. Now, beyond using alcohol with ALA if it's nerve related, or iron if it's related to low iron levels, there are other nutrients that can help. Folate. Now, most multivitamins use folic acid. That's a synthetic form. And the problem with it, some people can't convert that into the active form, which is methyl tetrahydrofolate. So when I create a multivitamin like our Invite Core Multi, the Invite for women, the Invite for men, and the Invite for like energy and performance, which is called Invite Performance, I use the methyl tetrahydrofolate form of folate. That's the active form. Because folate levels, when they're low, you're more likely to develop restless leg syndrome. This is, of course, even more common during pregnancy. The mineral magnesium and the mineral potassium are other things that can help. They're involved with nerve excitability, not just in the brain, but in your peripheral nervous system, the part of the nervous system that affects your muscles directly. So magnesium and potassium help control your neurons and their excitability and also blood flow. So if you're low in them, it can affect your muscles. You could get Charlie horses, muscle cramps, but also restless leg syndrome. So some patients, magnesium and potassium helps. A lot of clients, iron helps. Some of them, active folate helps, methyl tetrahydrofolate. There's also Diolsmin. We have Diolsmin in one of our circulatory products by Dr. Pressman. It's a natural flavonoid that's very good for venous function because sometimes it's simply poor circulation that's a problem. But I've had a lot of success with people with restless leg syndrome using a veins formula, where we mix citrus bioflavonoids and vitamin C along with bilberry, because this improves the tensile strength and the health of your blood vessels, like in your legs. And it also improves the integrity of the blood vessel walls and the cells that line the blood vessel walls so they work better. But also horse chestnut seed extract, high in acin, horsetail rush, and gatu kola, because that helps the valves in your legs. Some people have valvular reflux in the legs. So let's explain circulation a little bit. Your circulation is like a tree. There's the trunk and then the branches and then the leaves. Well, your circulation is your heart, at the core of your circulation, your heart and your lungs. And then there's these huge organs, these huge blood vessels called arteries. And that's where blood pressure takes place. That's delivering the oxygen-rich blood throughout the body. And once the oxygen is used up, the blood has to be returned back to the heart and lungs. That's returned through the veins. So the veins are much smaller and there's no pressure in there. So when you move your muscles, it helps the veins a little bit. But there's these valves. Like a valve would be you turn on the faucet, you're opening a valve and that lets the water come out. There's always pressure in the faucet. You open the valve and the pressure pushes the water through the faucet. And then when you turn the faucet off, you turn the knob and you're closing the valve again. Well, your veins work in the same way. There's valves in them. So when you're trying to get the blood back up to the heart and lungs from the legs, you're fighting gravity. So the valves close and help prevent the blood from flowing backwards. Well, with age, with obesity, with high blood pressure, with diabetes, with too much running and extreme exercise, with not enough exercise, the valves can weaken. Age itself can do it. And you start to get like venous stasis. The blood isn't moving that quickly. And so it's pooling and the clear liquids are seeping out to the surrounding tissues. And this could be part of restless leg syndrome. So I find that this veins HX, which improves the integrity of the blood vessel walls and their tensile strength, which is their workability, but also improves the health of the valves, has helped a lot of our clients. Now, there's also some lifestyle changes you can do. For instance, moderate activity. Over-exercising seems to increase the symptoms of restless leg syndrome, but moderate activity in human clinical trials has been shown, like aerobic activity, has been shown to improve the symptoms of restless leg syndrome. So even taking a walk. Keep down the alcohol. Alcohol affects circulation. Keep down the smoking. That affects circulation. Also, too much coffee. Too much coffee gives too much caffeine, and that can affect the nerves, and this can affect restless leg syndrome. Try to have a regular sleeping pattern. I mean, that's good for your internal clock. That's good to offset aging, but that's also good for the symptoms of restless leg syndrome. Leg massages seems to help. Acupuncture can help. A warm bath, using a heating pad. In fact, some people using an ice pack before bed. There are some new medical devices cleared by the FDA, but just a warning. System for getting approval of medical devices is not as intense as it is for getting the approval of a drug. Okay? So just bear that in mind. So I like medical devices to be around for a while before people use them. But these medical devices don't, they're not invasive. It's not like they're putting them inside your leg or something. One of them is a foot wrap, so it's a little safer to try these up front, right? One's a foot wrap that puts pressure underneath your foot. And another one is a pad that gives you vibrations to the back of your legs. And these seem to improve restless leg syndrome. So that's the deal. If you have restless leg syndrome, I would look into iron. I would have my blood checked for iron and use a non-constipating gentle iron like iron bisglycinate. If it's related to diabetes or nerve damage, look at Alcar with ALA. It could be extremely painful for nerve health. It's also great for your brain, by the way. If it's related to muscle cramps, you might look at the minerals, potassium and magnesium. Moderate exercise. Try to have a better schedule for sleeping, a more strict schedule for sleeping that you can stick to. Keep down the alcohol, get off the smoking, keep down the coffee intake. These are things you can do to improve restless leg syndrome. So thank you for tuning into the Invite Health podcast. You can find all of our episodes for free wherever you listen to podcasts, or just visit invitehealth.com/podcast. Please subscribe and leave us a review. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Invite Health. I hope to see you another time in another episode of the Invite Health podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Jerry Hickey signing off.